In the space between life and death, there exists a cosmic law that many fail to comprehend until it's too late. The universe isn't random. It's an intricate system of spiritual justice that operates with perfect precision. I have spent decades studying ancient texts, meditating in sacred spaces, and connecting with the invisible realms that surround us. What happens to those souls who have embraced darkness, cruelty, and malevolence during their earthly existence? This question has haunted humanity since we first gained consciousness of our mortality. I will share with you truths that few dare to speak, revelations about the terrifying fate that awaits the most evil souls. The transition we call death is merely a passage, a doorway through which consciousness continues its eternal journey. For those who lived with compassion, this passage brings peace. But for those who chose darkness, this transition becomes the beginning of an unimaginable reckoning. The first shock comes immediately after physical death. The protective veil of self-deception is violently torn away. Every evil soul faces what mystics call the mirror of truth, a state of expanded consciousness where they are forced to experience the full impact of every harmful action they committed. This isn't a symbolic experience. It's an immersive reality, more intense than any physical sensation. A murderer feels not just the pain of his victim's death, but the grief of every person who loved that victim. A man who abused his children experiences not only their physical pain, but the emotional damage that echoed through their entire lives. A corrupt leader who caused suffering through selfish policies feels the hunger, desperation, and hopelessness of every affected person simultaneously. This expanded consciousness becomes the first chamber of their hell, a hell they created themselves. As Edgar once revealed in his readings, the afterlife is not imposed upon us. We create it through our choices and actions while alive. The darkness we cultivate becomes our eternal companion. After this initial confrontation, the most malevolent souls find themselves drawn into a spiritual reclusivity, what some traditions call the umbral zones. These are not physical places, but states of consciousness characterized by dense spiritual energy that perfectly matches their inner darkness. Here, similar souls cluster together, creating realms of discord and suffering. Imagine the horror of being surrounded only by entities as corrupt and malicious as yourself, with no light, no hope, and no escape. These souls attempt to feed off each other's energy, but find only emptiness and increasing spiritual hunger. It's a perfect cosmic justice. Those who rejected connection, compassion, and love now exist in states where these qualities are entirely absent. The most disturbing aspect of this fate is what mystics call karmic immediacy. In physical life, evil actions might seem to go unpunished for years. In the afterlife, this buffer disappears. Every malicious thought immediately manifests as an experience. A soul that harbors hatred instantly feels that hatred directed back at itself. This creates a cycle of increasing torment that the soul cannot escape because it cannot stop generating the very thoughts that cause its suffering. Some traditions speak of souls so deeply corrupted that they experience a form of spiritual decomposition. This isn't annihilation, but a breaking down of higher consciousness, leaving only the most primitive aspects of awareness, enough to experience suffering without the capacity to understand or transcend it. What makes this fate truly terrifying is that these souls retain just enough awareness to know what they've lost. They remember the light they rejected. They understand the choices that led them to darkness. This late awakening brings no comfort, only the anguish of recognizing too late the path they should have taken. These souls often become bound to physical locations associated with their evil deeds. The murderer may find himself tethered to the scene of his crime. The torturer becomes imprisoned in the chamber where he inflicted pain. These are the entities that sensitive people sometimes perceive as dark presences in haunted places. Souls trapped in self-created purgatories, unable to move forward in their spiritual evolution. The cosmic law is perfect in its design. We create our afterlife through our choices in life. The most evil souls craft prisons of suffering more terrible than any punishment humans could imagine. And the most terrifying aspect, this fate isn't temporary. It continues until the soul, through processes we can barely comprehend, begins the long, painful journey toward redemption. But that journey cannot even begin until the soul fully accepts responsibility for every action, every choice, every moment of darkness it embraced. For the most corrupted souls, this acceptance may take what we would perceive as eons of time. What I'm about to reveal may disturb you, but the truth about spiritual justice must be understood. The afterlife journey of corrupt souls continues beyond the initial shock of the mirror of truth into what ancient mystics called the Chambers of Purification, though purification hardly describes the experience for the most malevolent entities. These chambers aren't physical spaces, but progressive states of consciousness that intensify as the soul descends deeper into its self-created abyss. Each chamber corresponds to a specific form of evil the soul embraced during life, creating a perfect symmetry between crime and consequence. The first chamber confronts souls who inflicted physical suffering. Here, they experience not ordinary pain, but a magnified spiritual agony that reflects every instance of harm they caused. A torturer who delighted in breaking bodies now feels his spiritual form continuously shattered and reformed, only to be shattered again. The sensation is described by those who have glimpsed these realms as being turned inside out, while remaining conscious of every moment. Most disturbing is that time operates differently in these chambers. What might seem like seconds in our physical reality can stretch into what feels like centuries in these states of consciousness. A soul may experience the same torment repeatedly in what mystic traditions call the eternal moment, a single instant of suffering that seems to extend indefinitely. The second chamber awaits those who manipulated and controlled others, stealing their autonomy and free will. Here, these souls find themselves completely helpless, subjected to overwhelming forces they cannot comprehend or resist. The cosmic symmetry is perfect. Those who dominated others now experience absolute powerlessness. The tyrant becomes eternally subjugated. The manipulator becomes eternally manipulated. In the third chamber, souls who spread hatred and division encounter what ancient texts call the fractured mirror. Their consciousness splinters into countless fragments, each experiencing isolation and rejection. They become unable to form coherent thoughts or maintain any sense of identity. This state perfectly reflects the division they sowed in life, as they now experience the ultimate separation from themselves. The fourth chamber holds those who accumulated wealth and power by exploiting others. Here they experience a spiritual poverty so profound that it creates an insatiable hunger that can never be satisfied. They perceive themselves as hollow vessels with an infinite void within, desperately seeking fulfillment that eternally eludes them. The more they grasped in life, the more empty they find themselves in death. What makes these chambers truly terrifying is the soul's complete awareness. Unlike physical pain, which may be escaped through unconsciousness, the soul remains acutely conscious of every sensation. There is no respite, no moment of relief, no dulling of perception. The intensity never diminishes. More disturbing still is what mystical traditions call the companion. Each soul in these chambers perceives a constant presence accompanying them, a witness to their suffering. Only after enduring unimaginable torment do they eventually realize this companion is their higher self, the divine spark they rejected and buried beneath layers of corruption. This realization brings not comfort but the most painful recognition. They chose this fate with every conscious act of evil. The cosmic justice extends beyond individual suffering. Souls who committed similar evils find themselves clustered together, creating collective realms of torment. The corrupt judge shares eternity with other corrupt judges. The child abuser is surrounded by other abusers. This grouping isn't arbitrary, but serves a profound purpose. Each soul sees its own evil reflected in countless others, making self-deception impossible. Some spiritual traditions speak of what might be called infernal guides, entities whose function is not to punish, but to ensure the soul fully experiences the consequences of its actions. These aren't demons of religious mythology, but aspects of universal consciousness that maintain the perfect balance of cosmic law. They neither hate nor love, but simply ensure that spiritual justice unfolds as it must. The most terrifying aspect of these chambers isn't the suffering itself, but the recognition that accompanies it. As the soul endures these states, it gradually comprehends that no external force imposed this fate upon it. There is no vengeful deity, no cosmic punishment. There is only the perfect manifestation of its own choices, the precise outworking of seeds planted during physical existence. This realization triggers what mystics call the second death, a state where the soul's constructed identity completely dissolves. All pretenses, justifications, and self-deceptions burn away, leaving only the naked truth of what that soul became through its choices. For those who embraced extreme evil, this second death is more terrifying than any physical demise could ever be. Yet even in these deepest chambers, a paradox exists. The suffering, though seemingly eternal from within that state of consciousness, serves a purpose within the larger cosmic design. It isn't punishment for its own sake, but the necessary experience that eventually, perhaps after what would seem like millennia to us, may lead to the first faint possibility of redemption. But for the most evil souls, that possibility remains so distant that it might as well not exist. For now, they remain trapped in chambers of their own making, experiencing the perfect reflection of the darkness they embraced in life. There exists a profound misconception among many spiritual seekers that all souls eventually find redemption, that cosmic justice ultimately yields to universal mercy. I must now reveal the uncomfortable truth that ancient wisdom traditions have preserved. For the most corrupted souls, there may be no escape from the consequences they have created. What truly separates these irredeemable souls from others is not merely the magnitude of their evil, but a fundamental choice made at the deepest level of consciousness. They haven't simply committed atrocities, they have consciously rejected the universal principle of love that binds all creation together. This rejection creates what mystical traditions call the severing, a self-imposed disconnection from the cosmic source. In the physical realm, this severing is incomplete. Even the most evil individuals retain a tenuous connection to universal consciousness, which is why redemption remains possible during life. But upon death, if this rejection was absolute and sustained, the severing becomes complete. The soul has essentially chosen isolation over unity, darkness over light, with full awareness of the consequences. This choice manifests as a condition mystics call spiritual gravity, a downward pull that makes ascension to higher planes impossible. Just as physical objects cannot escape Earth's gravitational field without sufficient energy, these souls cannot escape the lower planes without spiritual energy they have systematically rejected. They have become so energetically dense that they sink deeper into states of consciousness that exist far below what humans typically conceptualize as hell. So, these lowest realms are what ancient texts describe as the outer darkness, regions so far removed from light that they exist beyond the reach of divine intervention. This isn't because divine love is limited, but because these souls have developed an active aversion to it. When higher vibrations attempt to reach them, they experience not comfort, but increased torment, causing them to retreat further into darkness. The most disturbing aspect of this condition is that these souls maintain what spiritual adepts call inverted awareness. They perceive their situation not as punishment, but as preference. Their consciousness has become so distorted that they embrace their suffering as an affirmation of their separation. They would rather reign in their personal hell than serve in universal harmony. For these souls, reincarnation, often seen as a path to redemption, becomes impossible. Reincarnation requires a minimal alignment with universal principles, a basic acceptance of cosmic law. Without this, the soul cannot form the necessary connections to enter the physical plane again. They become spiritually infertile, unable to generate the essential energy required for rebirth. What remains is a state ancient mystics called the living death, existence without evolution, consciousness without connection, awareness without advancement. These souls experience a form of entropy where their spiritual energy gradually diminishes. They don't receive the renewing energy that comes from connection to the source, and what energy they retain is consumed by their own negative thought patterns. Some traditions speak of the eventual fate of such souls as the final dissolution, not annihilation in the sense of ceasing to exist, but a breakdown of individual consciousness back into undifferentiated energy. What makes this fate truly terrifying is that throughout this process, these souls retain enough awareness to comprehend what they've lost. They understand the transcendent joy and connection they rejected. They perceive, distantly, the realms of light they can never reach. This knowledge becomes another dimension of their suffering, the eternal recognition of squandered potential. The most malevolent souls often attempt to ease their condition by drawing energy from others. In life, they were spiritual parasites, deriving satisfaction from dominating and diminishing others. In death, this pattern intensifies as they become what some traditions call devourers, entities that attempt to feed on the emotional and spiritual energy of the living. This explains many phenomena associated with haunted locations and dark presences. However, this parasitic activity provides only momentary relief and ultimately accelerates their spiritual decline. Each attempt to drain others creates more negative karma, increasing their density and pulling them deeper into isolation. It's a desperate strategy that compounds their condition rather than alleviating it. Some spiritual traditions maintain that divine intervention can reach even these lowest realms, that cosmic mercy exceeds cosmic justice. But these are comforting myths that ignore the fundamental nature of consciousness and choice. The universe doesn't condemn these souls. They have condemned themselves through choices made with awareness of the consequences. The cosmic law remains perfect in its operation. Just as a hand voluntarily placed in fire will burn regardless of intentions or beliefs, a soul that embraces absolute evil experiences the natural consequence of that embrace. There is no punishment, only the perfect outworking of cause and effect on the spiritual plane. This teaching isn't meant to instill fear, but to illustrate the profound responsibility that comes with consciousness. Each choice moves us either toward greater harmony with universal principles or away from them. For most souls, the movement away is temporary and correctable. But for those who persist in evil beyond a certain threshold, who embrace darkness not from ignorance, but from conscious preference, the movement eventually becomes irreversible. The universe maintains perfect balance. Those who advance spiritually create states of bliss that exceed human comprehension. Those who consciously reject advancement create states of suffering equally beyond comprehension. This symmetry represents not cruelty, but the perfect justice inherent in the very fabric of existence. I have walked you through the darkest corridors of spiritual consequence, revealing truths that many teachers hesitate to share. Now, I must illuminate the final chapter of this cosmic journey, one that contains both profound warning and glimmers of hope, even for the most corrupted souls. What distinguishes the cosmic order from human systems of justice is its ultimate purpose. While human justice often seeks only punishment, cosmic justice aims at transformation. Even in the most severe spiritual consequences I've described, there exists what ancient mystics called the inevitable return, a principle so fundamental to existence that it operates beyond choice, beyond resistance, beyond even the most determined rejection of light. This principle manifests through what spiritual adepts call the cosmic heartbeat, a rhythmic pulse of expansion and contraction that moves through all levels of reality. Even souls in the deepest spiritual darkness experience this pulse. With each cosmic expansion, a trace amount of divine light penetrates even the most isolated realms. This light, so subtle that corrupted souls cannot actively reject it, plants seeds of transformation that operate beyond conscious awareness. Over vast epochs of what we would perceive as time, these seeds gradually alter the soul's energetic composition. This process is agonizingly slow, often taking what might be experienced as millions of years in human terms. But cosmic time operates differently. What seems eternal from within may be but a moment in the greater unfolding. The transformation begins with what mystics call the first question, a moment when, amidst unending suffering, the soul experiences a microsecond of genuine self-reflection. This isn't forced from outside, but arises organically from within, a spontaneous flickering of the divine spark that can never be completely extinguished, no matter how deeply buried. This momentary shift creates what spiritual traditions describe as the hairline fracture, a nearly imperceptible opening in the soul's self-created prison. Through this tiny opening, slightly more light enters during the next cosmic expansion. With each cycle, the fracture widens, allowing greater illumination, until eventually the soul experiences what ancient texts call the Great Remembering. In this state, the soul recalls its true nature and origin. It remembers that before its corruption, it was created from the same divine substance as all existence. This remembering triggers what mystical traditions call the spiritual infant state, a condition where the soul, having been completely broken down by its experiences, begins to reform in alignment with universal principles. This rebirth process isn't gentle. The soul experiences what spiritual adepts describe as compression, all the suffering it caused and experienced concentrated into intensive transformative pressure. This pressure creates spiritual density of a different kind, not the density of corruption that pulls downward, but the density of purified essence that contains tremendous potential energy. From this compressed state, the soul eventually emerges into what ancient wisdom calls the lowest heaven, a realm just above the purification zones, where it begins the long journey of healing and reconstruction. Here, the soul encounters what traditions describe as the compassionate guides, evolved beings who specialize in rehabilitating even the most damaged consciousness. These guides don't erase the soul's memory of its evil or its consequences. Instead, they help integrate these experiences into a new identity founded on understanding rather than ignorance, connection rather than separation. This integration process may take what we would perceive as thousands of years, but gradually, the soul develops what mystics call the capacity for light, an ability to both receive and generate positive spiritual energy. The most remarkable aspect of this redemption process is that souls who undergo it often develop unique capacities precisely because of their journey through darkness. Having experienced the furthest extremes of separation, they understand connection more profoundly than souls who never strayed far from light. This understanding makes them especially effective at helping others in similar conditions, creating a cosmic pattern where even the darkest experiences serve the ultimate purpose of expanding consciousness. This pattern reveals what spiritual adepts call the great paradox, the understanding that even the most terrible suffering serves the evolution of consciousness. This isn't to justify evil or minimize its consequences, but to recognize that within the larger cosmic design, nothing is wasted. Every experience, no matter how dark, contains the potential for transformation and growth. However, this eventual redemption doesn't diminish the severity of consequences I've described in previous chapters. The journey through darkness remains exactly as terrible as I've outlined. And for souls at the beginning of that journey, the eventual transformation lies so far distant as to be practically non-existent from their perspective. The suffering remains real, intense, and seemingly eternal from within that experience. This is why the choices we make during physical existence carry such profound importance. While cosmic law ensures that all consciousness eventually returns to harmony, the path taken can involve either greater or lesser suffering depending on those choices. The most direct path, living in alignment with universal principles of compassion, truth, and service, creates not just easier transitions after death, but greater joy during life. What makes this teaching particularly relevant is what many mystics are now sensing, that humanity stands at a critical juncture in its collective evolution. The density of negativity generated by human consciousness has created what spiritual traditions call the gathering shadow, a concentration of lower vibrations that makes it easier for souls to descend into darkness and harder for them to return to light. Those who consciously choose evil in this environment accelerate their spiritual descent at unprecedented rates. The cosmic law remains the same, but the energetic conditions intensify its effects, creating more extreme outcomes in both directions. Souls moving toward light advance more rapidly. Souls moving toward darkness descend more precipitously. This understanding reveals the profound significance of each individual choice. Every thought, word, and action either contributes to collective evolution or impedes it. There are no neutral actions, no choices without consequence. Each moment offers the opportunity to align more perfectly with universal principles or to move further into separation. The cosmic redemption I've described isn't a rescue from outside, but an awakening from within. It doesn't override free will, but fulfills its ultimate purpose: to choose consciously and with full awareness. Even souls in the deepest darkness eventually make this choice, though only after experiencing the full consequences of previous choices. The universe maintains perfect balance between justice and mercy, consequence and redemption, individual choice and universal law. This balance isn't imposed but inherent, the natural expression of consciousness evolving through experience toward ever greater realization of its true nature. Remember this teaching well, for in understanding the consequence of darkness, you illuminate your path toward light. In knowing the full spectrum of possibility, you empower your choices. And in recognizing the perfect justice of cosmic law, you align yourself with its higher purpose, the evolution of all consciousness toward universal harmony. If these revelations about spiritual justice and the fate of souls have awakened something within you, don't let this moment pass. Subscribe now to continue our journey into hidden spiritual truths that few dare to share. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or experiences. Your perspective matters in this collective awakening. The path to higher consciousness begins with awareness, and every subscription helps spread these essential teachings to those who seek them. Join our spiritual community today and take the first step toward aligning your soul with universal harmony.